Okay, welcome everyone to our Time to Restore call. We're going to go around and do introductions and updates in just a minute, but we are going to be talking today about some of the data that have been collected through the project over about the last 6 to 7 months. So I think it's a really great time because we have so many new observers, especially in Texas, to just kind of do a check-in on where we're at with the data collection and then get a sense of whether there are any potential issues with the data, kind of how we're doing in terms of data quality, and if we see anything that we might want to look at and kind of adjust for at this point, since we're kind of just getting started in the spring. So we're going to be doing that in a moment, but I just welcome anyone will kind of popcorn around, or feel free to, if you want to share something, you can share about, what's happening with phenology where you are, or if you have like project related updates or training activities or anything like that, feel free to share, or any events that you have coming up that are related or resources. So I welcome anyone to jump in if you'd like.
Sure, I can start. Let
Okay,
me know if my connection's working out okay.
yeah, we can hear you.
Gina Lloyd, I'm the Louisiana State Coordinator for Time to Restore. And right now, lots of really interesting phenology going on around here. The irises are blooming, dewberries are ripe. So my friends and I have been spending a lot of time taking advantage of that. But super beautiful, nice spring, lots of activity. But as far as activities that we're having in Louisiana this spring and moving forward, I've been working my way through the Master Naturalist chapters, of which there are woefully few in Louisiana, to do in-person trainings with their participants. So we have a couple of those scheduled for the summer, dates TBD, and also a workshop at the Audubon Louisiana Nature Center planned for mid-May. Date also TBD, but I will be sure to update you all when there's a firm date in place. And those workshops basically consist of about 45 minutes of classroom time going through a presentation about data collection, and then actually going and walking the phenology trail and doing a data collection session with those who are interested in learning how to use the app, input data, and figure out kind of some of the subtleties of data interpretation, which I am assuming we're going to talk about later today as far as what means what on the app. So yeah, that's me.
And I will share before we go to the next person, just a peek at some of Gina's photos. Gina takes amazing photos of a
Thank
lot of our
you.
species, so you can see some of them here. They're just awesome. So this is a really great resource for us. We're going to be using a lot of these in our new app that'll be coming out next spring, and actually having a photo for each of the phenophases that are part of the question. So it'll be a really wonderful resource. So thank you, Gina, for all the hundreds of photos you are taking.
Oh, my pleasure. It is so much fun. Gets me out there and really makes me feel like I have my finger on the pulse of what's going on with phenology.
Want to share an introduction or update or anything?
I can go and get me out of the way. Hi, everybody. My name is Rob Kroll. I'm the Climate Change Program Coordinator for the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, coming to you from far northern Wisconsin, where the snow just got off the ground last week. Um, we work for 11 Ojibwe tribes in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, and help them with their off-reservation treaty rights hunting and fishing and gathering. We have an ongoing plant phenology project. We started getting back out about a month ago, and we're seeing things like maple trees budding and wild leeks starting to grow. So pretty cool for very early spring in northern Wisconsin. And my role in this project is I help out with some ideas around tribal data sovereignty.
Yeah, and I think Kim Eichhorst isn't on the call today, but I know that the plans for the listening sessions are going to be starting up again. So we'll probably be reaching out to you soon, Rob, for some
Oh, good.
consultation on that. Yeah, they were able, we had those limitations with being able to use this grant for the listening sessions because everything is subject to FOIA, of course.
Hmm.
So Kim was able to secure some state funds. So those are hopefully going to be happening this summer or fall. So we wanted to get the team back together to continue talking about planning those. So should be in touch about that soon.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. And Barbara, I used to live in Seguin, just down the road from you.
And what made you leave?
Uh, this is kind of where I wanted to be up here.
when did you leave Seguin?
We left Seguin in 2018.
It's grown quite a bit since then.
We were down last year, and it's like, holy cow, where did all this stuff come from? Where did all these people come from?
Yeah.
Aaron, I can jump in there. I'm David Gwynn. I am the Texas coordinator for Time to Restore. And we've been having a great spring as well here in the Lone Star State. Aaron, I don't know if you want me to do updates now or you want to wait, or how do you want to do that?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So since the first of the year, we've had 539, mostly master naturalists, but also a lot of NIPSOP members go through a 1.5 hour training session, half of which was dedicated to Time to Restore, and the other half was a training session on how to use Nature's Notebook and set up your project, your profile, and ultimately your site. So has been a whirlwind. We've done that in about 11 different chapter forums all across the state. We now have all of the major urban areas of Texas actively participating in the project. Just recently added San Antonio. San Antonio was our holdout, but we have about 4 different very proactive chapters going in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We have 7 going here in the Houston area, 3.5. I've almost got a 4th one in Austin, and then San Antonio is now on board. So we are moving forward. When we first set out to do this, when Aaron and I were strategizing on how to make this work, we were very hopeful that we could just get the eastern half of the state involved, which is where most Texans live. But we are elated to report that all of Texas is reporting right now. We have West Texas involved. We have 21 counties around Lubbock in West Texas. We call it the Rolling Plains. That's actively involved in the project, all the way down to the Mexican border down in Southwest Texas, where I think they only had about 5 species they could track, but they are actively tracking for Time to Restore through Nature's Notebook. So we're just excited. And it doesn't stop there. Beginning in May, we're going to kick off a monthly training that can be accessed by anybody in the state. So trainings are going to continue to go. First Wednesday evening of the month. Anybody and everybody across the country is eligible to participate. Just sign up, and we'd love to have you. So we'll keep moving on as we transition from April into May, and then all the way up until September. We'll do a monthly training and continue to add people. I'm also transitioning away from the initial trainings to now start to build capacity with the members that have stepped up to build their relationships with Nature's Notebook and Time to Restore. And we're also trying to make sure that if there are any holes in our coverage, that we're adding them as well as we can move forward. We've also been able to add about 6 local phenology programs, mostly in urban areas. But those have been really exciting because we've had master naturalist chapters step up and say, we want to be the umbrella group for native gardens in our service area. And so Galveston Bay, which is a chapter right on the Gulf Coast, stepped up first and said, we'll be the leader in this regard. And then added about 6 of their native gardens under that. So we've got another one going in North Texas doing the very same thing. So look to the second year of Texas's participation in Time to Restore to have lots of exciting things to build and grow. And we will continue to report on that accordingly. Hope that wasn't too much, Aaron.
That's great. Very awesome work. Impressive number of places in Texas. It's a big state, but doing a great job in covering it. Anyone else want to share anything?
I'll just pop in and say hi, and that's incredible, David. Thank you so much. That's so thrilling to hear about all that effort and all that enthusiasm. And Barbara, welcome. It's so cool to have new people join. I'm Teresa Crimmins. I'm the director of the network, and I'm here primarily just to keep up on all the amazing stuff that's coming out of this effort. It's truly so exciting. So thank you. I'm eating my lunch, which is why my video is off.
Anything else? Anyone else? All right, so I'm going to share my screen again. So I wanted to share an update on the phenology data that we have so far. Huge thank you to Erin Zylstra, who's on the call here. Erin is a research scientist at the NPN, and she was able to put together a really amazing dashboard of the data collected over the last 6 or 7 months or so, and really made it easy to put together this summary, looking at some of the data quality issues that we've had, and just all the great parts of the data as well. So just as a reminder, in case you are kind of newer to the project, the goal for the data collection portion is to try to collect information about the flowering and the seed timing of nectar plants in our 4 states of New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. We're hoping to have enough repeated observations of when things are flowering and going to seed over multiple years to be able to do an analysis where we can understand what are the things that are impacting the timing of those flowering and seed events. So we can better understand, is it, temperature? Is it precipitation? What are the things that drive those phenological events? And then actually use what we know about climate projections to try to understand how things are going to change in the future. So for example, if we know that the flowering timing and temperature are very correlated, then we might say with increased temperature, you might see a shift in flowering one way or another. So that's the overall goal. So a lot of you were part of our original workshops way back in 2021, where we tried to put together a list of priority species. That has grown to quite a few. We have 53 species that we're considering among our priority species at this point. During those workshops back in 2021, we had come up with a kind of a short list of 8 priority species, but we had a longer list that we kind of had various people in different states vote on, that we've kind of included some of those here. And then we also had additional workshops last year with Texas observers and stakeholders, and that ended up being quite a long list as well. So this is kind of the full list of all 53 species that we have that we're kind of considering here and looking at in this data summary. So this is a map showing the locations of where people are reporting on those priority species across our 4 states. This is just the data since October of last year. We kind of wanted to kind of look at a picture of what people have been reporting this year, but then we started to think about, well, there might be some plants that kind of started doing their thing at the end of last year that are kind of more active during the winter, especially in our southern areas. So we went back to October of last year to include that as well. So the size of those circles represents how many species are being recorded. So you can see those bigger circles are places where more than 1 species, up to 12 species are being reported. And then the smaller dots are where just a couple. So Texas is definitely dominating here. We've got a ton of observation locations. It's very exciting. And then we have quite a few in Louisiana as well. Fewer in Oklahoma and New Mexico on those priority species, but we'll talk about how those actually have been longer term data collection locations. So looking a little bit closer here at each of our states, so this is just kind of zooming in to show you the locations. Most of our sites are in more urban areas across all of our states, though we do have a couple scattered around in some more rural locations. And in Louisiana, we have all the way up to Monroe. We have some activity up there with the majority in the New Orleans area. In New Mexico, again, it's mostly urban areas. We've got some in Albuquerque and then up in Santa Fe. So not great coverage around the rest of the state, but much fewer people in those areas. And it's been harder for them to find our priority species. So I mentioned earlier in the call, the listening sessions that we're planning on doing with pueblos in New Mexico. We're hoping as part of that to identify some different species that might be more appropriate for New Mexico. So it might help with getting some more sites online in this state. Oklahoma just has a couple as well in Oklahoma City, and then I'm not sure This might be there was a library that was involved, that is involved as a local phenology program. I think that might be that location there. So still working also on getting some more sites set up in Oklahoma. And then Texas here, you can see a little bit better picture of mostly again in urban areas, though we do have some good locations in rural areas as well. And I'm not sure, David, we're not seeing those sites yet showing up in Western Texas, but
Yeah.
it might be that I might
Yeah.
be a couple weeks old at this point, so
Okay.
we'll
Okay.
probably see those appear
Yeah.
soon.
Okay. Yeah, Aaron, and this maybe I can throw this out there. So one of the things that started to occur in the training conversations is for people who are out and about in more rural parts of the state. Is that an opportunity for them to use iNaturalist to observe some of our bloom and seed phenomena, as opposed to trying to set up a site to a place they might not ever visit again? So we
Yeah.
might want to talk about that as a potential option to get some of the more rural parts of the state represented in the Time to Restore project.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to do for now. As of next spring, when we have our new app, it'll be much easier to submit kind of a one-time observation. But yeah, since we don't have that yet, iNaturalist is a great solution for that, for a place that you might only visit once or might not be able to visit regularly. Here is a summary looking at the number of species, plants per species on average for each state. So we can see that Texas does have a lot of sites, and Louisiana has quite a few as well. In terms of number of species, I think that's about the number of priority species that we have on our Texas list, which is great. Quite a few species in Louisiana as well. Looking at kind of the mean number of species per site, that I think is interesting. We kind of have recommended to people like just start out with one or two and see how you do. So that seems like people are following that guidance. We also recommend, if you can, to pick more than one individual plant per species, if you can. And so is that here? I think, or maybe that's later on. This is the mean number of plants per, so this is just overall plants per site. I think we look at the other one later about the number of individuals per species. So we'll look at that in a bit. I got ahead of myself. And then in terms of the mean number of observations per site, this is where we can really see how these three states have been active a lot longer than Texas. So, we started this project first in these three states, Louisiana, New Mexico, and Oklahoma, back in 2021. So they've had a chance to get more observations together. So I think they've been probably more active since October 2024 than our Texas observers have primarily come on this year. So I expect to see that would increase quite a bit over the next year. And then in terms of kind of the most observed species, I just pulled the top 5 species kind of in these different categories. This is across all 4 states. So if you look at by the number of plants, American beautyberry is actually our top observed species, followed by red maple, eastern redbud, common buttonbush, and Texas bluebonnet. So even though Texas observers are newer, we're seeing that is definitely a top species. People are very interested in the bluebonnet. If you look at by number of sites, it's pretty similar. They're just kind of the same 5, just kind of adjusted the order that they appear there. But then the top species by mean number of observations, these are going to be weighted more by the Oklahoma, Louisiana, and New Mexico observations. So we have quite a different list of species there. If you look by number of observations, with trumpet honeysuckle on top, which is surprising to me. I didn't think, and the purple prairie clover, I didn't think those were so well observed. So that's interesting, and cool that those are being tracked. And then looking by state, this probably makes sense to you all. From Texas, you have your American beautyberry is still the top species there. Eastern redbud, bluebonnet, Turk's cap, I know that's very popular, and frostweed. In Louisiana, red maple, I think that's, we've had a lot of really long-term data collection on red maple in a bunch of locations in Louisiana. It's one of our Gulf Coast Phenology Trail target species, and also buttonbush, beautyberry, which was also added as a priority species for the Gulf Coast Phenology Trail. Eastern baccharis, which is an important pollinator plant, especially for monarchs in the fall because it's a late bloomer. And then redbuds. New Mexico is where we've had actually a lot of these sites have been going for a long time. And so they have rubber rabbitbrush, a couple of milkweeds, and sunflower. And then Oklahoma just has two of our priority species, and that's the purple prairie clover and eastern redbud. And so I think this is where we have the number of plants per species, but this is just kind of a summary of by each kind of an average observer and what are they tracking. So this is a breakdown of how many observers we have right now in the 4 different states, the number of species that each observer is tracking, the number of plants, and then the number of plants per species. So for the number of plants per species, that's where we generally recommend to have some kind of capture the variation that you might see between individual plants. If you can track 2 to 3 individuals of a species. So if you're interested in bluebonnet, for example, you might have 2 or 3 of those plants registered at your site. Or if they're kind of in patches, you might have 2 or 3 patches. And so we have a little bit higher numbers in some of the states, like in Oklahoma. But I think, 1 is great if you just have 1 available, but if you can do more than 1, then that's really great as well. A lot of times, the genetics of the plant can make a difference, or the microclimate that the plant happens to be in. So if you can record more than 1, it could be really useful for kind of giving a better overall picture of what's happening with phenology at your site. And then this is looking even more closely at the number of species each observer monitored. So overall, most people are doing 1 species as well as 1 plant per species, and it kind of declines as you grow in the number of species and the number of plants monitored. There's a 16 over here, that's a lot of species. I don't know who's doing that, but that's probably more than we would recommend doing unless you really want to devote a lot of time to this. Generally just a few species is great. So any questions on that so far, or any thoughts before I jump to some of the data quality stuff? I also, we can keep iterating on this kind of information. So like at the next call, if there's other information that's missing from here, or you have questions about, we can put together additional summaries. And so, yeah, definitely open to hearing if there's other stuff that you'd like to see in a future meeting, we can add that.
I think this is all super helpful. The data visualizations, especially, it really helps me direct what things to focus on when I'm doing in-person trainings, because a lot of these things would not necessarily have occurred to me. And, the type of plant that you're looking at being super relevant to how the training proceeds, I think is useful information to have. And I appreciate all this data.
Aaron, I'd also tag on one of the ways to make this even more helpful for us. And one, kudos to Aaron for Aaron Z for going out there and running the analysis. I know she's got a new role with the network. So thank you, Aaron, for doing this. Aaron P and I have been talking about how we can use this information to understand what the data is telling us, but also how to impact our trainings so that we're giving volunteers a way to address their questions, their unsure issues on the front end. And I think that's one way that this will be even more helpful is if we can use it to spot problems or anomalies in the data set, and then maybe head them off as we're doing trainings and outreach with interested and active volunteers.
Yes, and we will be getting into some of those next. So definitely, yeah, we can see if those answer the questions that you have. I also was just checking the chat, and Christine mentioned about the INAT training about phenology annotations. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, there is a great webinar recording out there about phenology annotations that you can now add to INAT. And so that is another thing that can help us to, we are planning on pulling together data from Nature's Notebook, of course, and then also the herbarium specimens that we have students scoring right now, which gives us a really nice depth of historical records. And then iNaturalist data to kind of give us a lot of records that have maybe like all flowering records to kind of supplement. So if the iNaturalist observations have phenology annotations, that makes it even better. We can kind of use that to hold certain records. So yeah, definitely. Thanks for bringing that up. It's a great way to add more phenology relevance to your INAT data. And thanks for joining us, Barbara.
Yeah, Aaron, to also tag on Christine's comment, I just recently went out onto INAT and started to learn how to annotate other people's photos. And so it's a great way for active volunteers who have downtime, particularly as the summer gets a little hot, particularly here along the Gulf Coast. It might be a great way to switch and see if we can annotate existing observations with priority plants to be able to make them more usable for phenology studies and research.
Yeah, we should add something to a summer newsletter about that and recommend that. Let's remember to do that.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's move on to some data quality stuff. So overall, I think the first thing that jumped out at me from Aaron's dashboards was overall, I think everyone's doing a really good job answering the phenophase questions of yes or no in kind of the way that we intended. But I just wanted to review that really quick. So if you've done our observer certification course or other trainings, this is actually an excerpt from our phenophase primer. You know that our phenophase questions are overlapping. So we have some, we call them our kind of overarching or nested phenophases. So these are the ones that we care about in particular for this project, our flowers and fruits phenophases. And just keep in mind that when you answer questions, they are kind of related to each other. So if you start saying flowers or flower buds, that means any flowers that are on your plant, regardless of if they're open or closed. So once you start saying yes for open flowers, you always want to continue to say yes for flowers or flower buds. So we consider that to be this kind of overarching phenophase. Same thing for fruits. So you start saying fruits when you see any fruits at all. Once you start seeing bright fruits, you start saying yes for that, but you continue to say yes for fruits. And so overall, people did a great job with that. We did see a few examples where people would actually say this, which is a yes for open flowers, but a no for flowers or flower buds. We saw this in particular for Eastern red buds. It came up a few times. So just wanted to remember this is not the way to do it. We want to make sure that if we are ever saying yes for open flowers, we always say yes for flowers or flower buds as well. Same thing for fruits. So we had this a few times for sunflower, common sunflower, where people would say yes for ripe fruits, but a no for fruits. That is also not right. We want to make sure we always say yes for both. So you can't have a ripe fruit without a fruit. So just want to make sure that's clear. Another thing we looked at was the what we call the prior no's. So with this project, we're really interested in a couple different what we call metrics or like aspects of the phenology. One is when did flowering start or when did seed timing start? And when did it end? And that kind of lets us see the length of the season. And so this is kind of a graphic that shows you the interval that you might be making observations. So let's say you were going every 6 days and you go out and you look at your plant and you look for open flowers and you say no, and then 6 days later you say no, and then you say yes. That means that this kind of period of uncertainty is 6 days long, where we know that the yes happened sometime in here, but we don't know which day. And so when we look at the data and do data analysis, it's much better if that window of time is small because it just makes it much easier to do the modeling. It improves the data quality. So we want to see this window between your last no and your first yes to be as small as possible. So when we look at the prior no's, this is looking at the onsets or the transitions from a no to a yes in 2024 and 2025. And then they're broken down by different phenophases. So the flowers or flower buds, open flowers, fruits and bright fruits for each year. And the colors correspond to how many days is in that period of uncertainty. And so what we want to see is these colors up here, the only 1 to 3 days or 4 to 7 days, we'd like those to be as big as possible, whereas we'd like these, which is more than 30 days, so that's over a month of uncertainty, we'd like these to be small. And that will just really help with the modeling as part of this project to be able to make an accurate kind of prediction of when the flowering started. So we see that things have shifted and gotten a little bit better, I would say, between 2024 and 25. So we're seeing people are doing a pretty good job this year of making sure that these blues are smaller and then these colors up at the top are bigger. We also see that it's decreasing, as you go through the phenophases. I think that's probably because when people started observing this year, maybe flowering had already started, so they like didn't capture a prior no, or they were less sure about what they were looking at. And then they started to go out more frequently once they started to see the flower. And so we see these windows getting smaller over time. So just try if you can to go out to visit your plants once a week. Or even more frequently during the period when things are really changing. So for example, if you're going out and you're looking and you see flower buds on your plant, it would be really great to capture the first open flowers with that smallest period as possible. So make sure once you start seeing flower buds, try to go out to your plant more frequently. And then once all the flowers are kind of open and your plants kind of reach that peak bloom, then you could go less frequently after that until you start seeing the fruits. And then you want to do the same thing to try to capture that first yes for bright fruits with the smallest period of uncertainty. This is looking kind of the same information, but looking by species. So some of our top species that had, I think it's, what is it, more than 10 or yeah, more than 10 yes observations in both years. So we can kind of get a sense of the species where we have maybe more uncertainty. I'd say Eastern redbud could use a little help. We have a really big block here for the more than 30 days between the last no and the first yes. Red maple is pretty good. The majority of people are reporting the onset within 4 to 7 days a week, which is great. And so, yeah, just maybe some room for improvement in maybe Eastern redbud. But overall, this looks pretty good as well. And then I also wanted to highlight how we count intensity. So this is something that I think can be pretty confusing and overwhelming. So I always recommend if you are not sure about the intensity measures, just skip them. You don't have to answer that. If you just answer the yes, no questions, that's great. In this graph example here, we have someone who's reported a no and then a yes. And so if you just want to report that, that's wonderful. If you do want to do the intensity observations, keep in mind that what we're after is we're trying to capture the peak. So we're really interested in when were the most flowers or flower buds on your plant. And when was the highest percentage of open flowers? And then the same thing for ripe fruits and fruits. So if you are kind of off by a bin and you aren't sure, is it 5 to 24 or less than 5? I don't know. Don't stress too much about it. Just do your best and try to just capture when it kind of reaches the peak, because that's going to be the most useful information that we can use for the project. So for an example here, this is one of our top species for Texas bluebonnet. If you are counting this species, remember to always look at the phenophase definition. So this definition is going to tell you how to count the flowers for this species. So it tells you that if you have a species where individual flowers are clustered in inflorescence, that's a flower structure, then estimate the number of flower head spikes or catkins and not the number of individual flowers. So in this case, you don't have to try to count how many of these little flowers are on each of your structures. This is a species where this is a spike of flowers and inflorescence. So you are actually going to be counting how many of those are on your plant or in the patch. So it should be a lot simpler than trying to count each individual flower. And again, just do your best. If you don't want to have to count every single one on here, I think I went through and did this and it was something like 54 for this example. You can use your best judgment and try to just place your estimate into one of these bins. I like to use the tactic of kind of like excluding bins. So if I looked at this picture, before I circled all of these, I know that it's definitely not less than 3 and not less than, or not 3 to 10, and it's not more than 1,000. And so it's going to be somewhere in here. So I really just have to try to figure out which one of these 2 bins it's in. So you could use tactics like, measuring or estimating how many are in a portion of this patch. And then maybe you like hold up your hand and you cover that area. And then you see how many hands can cover the patch and multiply. There's different tactics like that. And we do go over those kind of methods for estimating in our observer certification course in the 4th module, which is on estimating intensity. So definitely check that out. So for this example, we would put our estimate into this 11 to 100 bin. For fruits, I think this can be kind of confusing as well, how to count the fruits. And so again, definitely read the definition that we have. So this is the fruits definition, and it says the fruit is a hairy pod that changes from green to tan or light brown. So this is telling you when you can consider it ripe as well. This is what's called a species-specific definition, which can be really useful. And so within the pod, we have seeds, but we're actually interested in counting the fruits. And so you know that because the question says how many fruits are present. So if you were looking at this example, again, this is the bluebonnet, you're counting the number of pods. You don't have to try to count the number of seeds in the pod. So just keep that in mind. If you're assessing ripe fruits and how many or what percentage of the fruits are ripe, then you would want to get an idea of, is each pod going to have like 100% ripe fruits? Is it, at the point where it'll tell you, but right in here that the color is an indication, and then sometimes it splits, sometimes explosively to expose the seeds. If they're all kind of in the same state, then you can just make an estimation that it's 95% or more ripe fruits. If about half of them seem to be ripe, of the pods, then you can estimate either 25 to 49 or 50 to 74%. So just remember to always reread the definitions because that has a lot of useful information. We also looked at the additional information that you're reporting. So if you've been on the Nature's Notebook website, when you register a plant, you have the opportunity to report a lot of what we call metadata or additional information about your plants. And so this can be a really great way to tell us more about things that might influence the phenology of your plants. So things like the shade status, whether it's a wild or a planted or seed-grown plant that you put the seeds out for, whether it's watered, fertilized, probably most of these are not going to have a particular sex. If you know the planting date, you can indicate that. And then this is where you can also manage your plants and delete them. You can't do this on the app, so you do have to do this on the website, but this can be really useful information. This is also where you can indicate if your plant is a patch. So this is really useful for a lot of these wildflower species because sometimes it can be really hard to tell, like with that example of the bluebonnet, what an individual plant is versus just an area where you have a lot of them. So you could register this as a patch that maybe is 16 square feet large. So we looked at how many people are actually reporting that information. And so of the 284 plants across all states, we had 225, I guess, that had a planting date, if that's right, which seems like a lot to me. One that had a death date reported. So you can definitely, if you know when your plant died, you can indicate that. It'll be removed from your observation deck, and then you can add another species. We had 52 people that said that their plant was a patch. And then is that 45 that told us the size? I think that's what that means. And then we also had quite a few report on whether their plant was wild. So we had, 74 said it was, 100 said it was not. So that's maybe a plant in their yard. We had quite a few people also tell us about whether their plant is watered. and most people said that it's not, although quite a few people said that they do water their plants. And then for fertilize, most people said that they did not. Only 9 said that they fertilize their plants. So we'd love to get those numbers up as well. So you can take a few minutes to go onto your observation deck and add those details in. And you can always, say no for if you don't know. If it's wild, you can just skip that. But if you do water or fertilize your plant, we really want to know about that because that can really influence the phenology. So just a summary of kind of these recommendations. So remember about the nestedness of open flowers under flowers or flower buds and bright fruits under fruits. We are trying to capture onsets within 7 days, but fewer than that is really great. Remember to count inflorescences and then fruits instead of the seeds when you're doing the intensity measures. And then also please don't stress out. These are all optional, so you can always skip questions on the data sheet. You can always skip the intensity measures if you're not sure. Any questions or thoughts on that? Oh, thanks, Christine. Yeah, if you want to add the patch sizes, that's great. So, yeah, now that we've kind of looked at what we have so far to try to tell you about data quality, are there any other things that you would want to know about that we could look at maybe for the next call? We also, at some point soon, will be looking at the actual phenology data and trying to get some summaries together of that. So that will be forthcoming as well. But in terms of, I guess, data quality or things that you want to know about making observations, is there anything else that you are curious about that we can summarize? And Erin, I don't know if you have anything to add onto that.
I don't think I have anything to add, but happy if people have ideas about things they need or information about how people are collecting data or how much there is, yeah, just let me know and we can do that.
If there's any of the graphics or tables that we went over that you'd like to see for like your state in particular, we can also do that. So I think we talked about that maybe for like the prior no's. We didn't break that out by state, but we can do that if it's useful. And also, I guess, let me share this once again. Like this graphic, if you'd like to see particular species, we kind of excluded species that had fewer than 10 yes observations, but we could expand that and do all the data that we have, even if it's only a few records, if that's something you're interested in. But overall, I think it was really exciting to see how much data we have this year. Really exciting to see all of the efforts in Texas and Louisiana in particular. I think it's great. We have so many priority species. I think we had, originally intended to have a much smaller list, but I think we're going to end up with a lot of interesting data on a lot of different types of plants. So it's great to have all of these efforts. Really appreciate it. If you think of anything else, feel free to reach out to me or me and Erin Zylstra, and we can think about that for the next call. Is there anything else related to time to restore or otherwise that anyone else wanted to talk about?
I just wanted to thank y'all for all you do. I know these are very uncertain times right now, and this is trying for all of us. But nature needs us and the environment needs us. So trudge on, and thank you for all you do to help us better understand the consequences of our action.
Thank you, David. Yes, I think it's very peaceful to go outside and look at a plant for a few minutes, even if it's just 2 to 3 minutes, maybe longer. All right, well, if there's not anything else, thank you for joining us. We'll see you in a couple months. Take care. Bye, everybody.